Hey gang, we are in Deming, New Mexico, and we are at a cemetery called Mountain View here in Deming. And actually just down the highway here, get to Las Cruces north of El Paso, you can go see the grave of Pat Garrett. Who's Pat Garrett? Well, most of you know he killed Billy the Kid. So they say, big conspiracy, right? Anyway, Pat Garrett. We're not here to talk about Pat Garrett. Everybody's covered Pat. I want to cover somebody that very few people probably know about. It's a woman, a husband and wife who are buried here, who led a very, very interesting life. And I'm going to tell you her story. We're going to walk to her grave, but it all started in Warsaw, Kentucky. And young girl there, boy, oh boy, did she travel the western frontier. And if you're into gambling, she was probably one of the best card sharps, dealers, all sorts of trouble ran into. So let's take the walk and I'll tell you about her journey from Kentucky, where it started out. Yeah, she had a father who was into gambling, and he was teaching her all the tricks of the gambling houses in that area of Warsaw. They were a wealthy family there, actually. Her father was raising horses, race horses. He was raising crops, or he had success with that. They were doing well. But yeah, he was a very talented gambler. And in those days, gambling was kind of a high society thing. It was also something that, well, it was in the shady saloons, but it was kind of a big entertainment thing, and there were a lot of good gamblers that were talented, and not only talented at playing the cards and the games, but also the cheats. So took her up and down the Mississippi River from Kentucky, teaching her the secrets of the game at some of the finest casinos. She went with him to the St. Charles Hotel, the Victor's, the Gem on Royal Street, New Orleans' favorite stop. And she learned fast. But again, it was more of a pastime, a hobby, not a career. Now, her name was Carlotta J. Thompkins. And this was going back to 1844 on April 21st when she was born. And as a young, I'm going to say 10, 12, 14-year-old, up to 16 years old, she was traveling around with him. She was very remarkable. She was actually beautiful. She had dark red hair, brown eyes. What's interesting is, because of all the attention she would get, of course this was slavery times, just pre-Civil War, Carlotta would have a slave kind of assigned to her, and the slave's name, it was a woman, her name was Mary Poindexter. And what's really interesting about Mary is that she was 7 feet tall. Now, was she really 7 feet tall? Maybe not. Was she 6'8" or 6'9"? Probably. So yeah, it's nobody messed with her. And when I say nobody messed with her, I'm talking about Carlotta, because she had Mary Poindexter behind her. And by the way, we tried to find pictures of her. We searched far and wide, and I'm talking about Deb, I'm talking about my ancestry helper, Cheryl D., who's helped us on past episodes, and we just could not find a picture. If any of you find a picture of Mary Poindexter, I'll post it. I would give anything to see a picture of her. So anyway, Civil War came, and sadly her Her father was killed in his very first engagement, of course, Confederate side. And, Mary Poindexter was looking after the family, looking after Carlotta. Carlotta was only 17 at the time. And they decided, no more money. They were losing the farm, the race horses, and no support, no father, no husband. And they decided Mary with Carlotta was going to go to Detroit, up to Detroit, to try to make some money, and maybe also to try to find a husband. So then they went up there and didn't meet anybody favorable. So they started running out of money. And what do you turn to? Well, she decided to turn to the cards and playing. And it was pretty unusual to see a woman, especially a young woman, come into the card room. Raised a lot of eyebrows, but she did. And all the things that she learned from her father she took, coupled with the fact that she was really good. And she started winning. And she started winning some really good money. And that was money she could send back home to her mom and her sisters. I think there were two younger, anyway, they were two younger sisters. She was paying for their education. Sadly, everything seemed to be getting back on track when Carlotta's mom had a stroke. She had to go back, and she was about to go back, and everything was, of course, up for grabs. And then she got this special invitation, a special invitation to play at this very high society. I shouldn't say play, work at, but that meant play and host and all that, because she was very attractive at this card club in Detroit. She went to work there, and of course she was making good money at the cards, but this was a high society place. And it was kind of like a really good lucky break for her. And that's where she met this guy named Johnny Golden. Now, Johnny Golden was actually a jockey on the horse, one of the horses for her father. They did know each other. He was a really good gambler, card player, so they were kind of like a team. And they would play at the different places, and both very skilled gamblers. And they decided to leave that place and get on the riverboats, go up and down the Mississippi, just like she did with her father. She got big Mary Poindexter watching out for her. By the way, one evening she was walking with her umbrella along the river at one of the stops, and Mary was kind of shadowing her, and Mary jumped out and pushed her down. She almost stepped on a huge rattlesnake, and to save her, if you will, Mary grabbed for the lunging snake and got bit on the finger, which had to be amputated, but she came through it. But yeah, they're on these riverboats, and they are winning, doing well. It's the same old thing, except that Johnny Golden would get in a fight with a guy, and it was actually a knife fight. They both pulled their knives out, and Johnny killed him, so he would have to go on the run. Never saw him again. Well, the next stop would be Texas. They boarded a steamer They were in New Orleans, and I'm talking about Mary and Carlotta. These incidents kept happening. Thank God that she had Mary Poindexter, you know, a Union soldier on the riverboat, gambling, accused her of cheating, lunged across the table. And what does Mary Poindexter do? She jumps up, literally picks him up, throws him in the river. Yeah. It would be a few years later that Johnny Golden would die. I mean, the story on him was he did get away with the murder, if you will, but they caught him on another crime, and that whole posse got ambushed while they were taking him into town to face trial. It would be 1865, and Carlotta and Mary would eventually end up in San Antonio. It was the end of the Civil War, and San Antonio was absolutely booming. And they say there was so much money on the tables that people would literally take their winnings home in ox carts. It was crazy. And of course, Carlotta was winning and winning. Her favorite spot was the Cosmopolitan Saloon. And she soon earned the respect of all the top gamblers there. Now, she would end up at a club called the University Club. That was the elite club there. And it was owned by the Thurman family from Georgia. Those were where the biggest games were. And she mingled with the wives, and they really all loved her. She, you know, the way she dressed, she was beautiful, but she had a great personality too. So she was getting invited to all the events, and she was with this brother, Frank Thurman, one of the brothers who owned the joint, the University Club, and they were romantic, and they were probably going to get married, except for the fact that trouble would intervene. Frank got attacked by one of the customers, and he had a Bowie knife hidden, as most of those owners would have some protection on the body, and he killed the guy. And the family of that young man were so incensed, as many would be, right or wrong, that they put a bounty, a huge bounty, on Frank's head, which meant he had to skip town. So he said, "Carlotta, I love you, goodbye," and he had to leave. And he was gone. Well, what did Carlotta do? Carlotta didn't follow him. She stayed. She stayed for about a year. And then she quietly slipped out of town. Where did she go? She headed up to San Angelo. That's Fort Concho. Pretty rough place at the time. But Carlotta was good at cards, and they had some good card rooms there. Now, she's by herself. She split up with Mary Poindexter. They had some kind of disagreement. Post-Civil War, not a slave anymore. I'm betting that had a lot to do with it. And she goes there, and she hits the card rooms. And what do you think? She just starts cranking again, winning. And there, she's less social. She's more the introspective, take my winnings, go home, tight-lipped. And the women there, they're all like whispering. And they made up a nickname for her called Mystic Maud. Now it's funny, she already had a couple of nicknames going. She was nicknamed the Angel of San Antonio. She was nicknamed Lottie Deno. Lottie Deno came about because she took a lot of money off one drunk gambler, and he said, "You won a lot of dinero off me." And the people started saying Lotta Dinero, which got shorted to Lot of Deno, which got shortened to Lottie Deno. And that's her most famous. That's kind of what stuck the most. But back in San Angelo, she's playing out the town, and she quietly slips away. Now there's a strategic plan here. Where is she going? She is going to Fort Griffin. Fort Griffin. There is a lot of things going on there. There's a lot of cowboys. There's a lot of buffalo hunters. There are outlaws, gamblers, soldiers, you know, everything you can imagine. It was booming. And it was a perfect place for her to play cards. Now, she just happens to go there and immediately start working at a saloon called the Beehive, Big Gambling. And she's dealing faro, and she's like, Fort Griffin. She's like in the scene immediately, almost like she knew somebody. Well, the guy that owned that place was going by the name of Fogarty, and you know who that was? That was really Frank Thurman. So it was all a plan for her to, you know, snake up there. The idea of not being followed, like she just disappeared on her own and drifted wherever. So they had a plan. So she was there in Fort Griffin. Now, it was 1876. Now, as most of you know, that's the year Doc Holliday was there. That's the year Dave Rudabaugh was there. Now, Dave Rudabaugh, Dirty Dave, they called him, that was Doc's friend, called him Dirty Dave because supposedly he never took a bath. So we got Dirty Dave Rudabaugh, all kinds of other outlaws. And that's when Wyatt Earp came and met Doc Holliday at Fort Griffin. And they had the conversation, and they became friends. Where's Rudabaugh? And actually, Doc Holliday did tell him where he was going. He's going to Kansas. So Wyatt Earp wires Bat Masterson, and they end up getting Dirty Dave and arresting him. And he would go, you know, in jail, out, in jail. He's really a bad guy, killing people. He would end up in Parral, Chihuahua, in Mexico, in a town, killed 2 guys in a saloon, wounded another, goes out for his horse. Where's my horse? Somebody probably took it. And the mistake he made, he goes back in the bar, and they're like, you know, behind the door, behind the bar, and they blast him. And they cut his head off, and they put it on a pike, and they displayed that all over town. But anyway, she would get into card games with Doc Holliday. She was dealing faro. She played cards. It is said that Doc lost to her one night in a big game that went till sunrise, and he took it all in good stride. They were both good gamblers. And, you know, she was so beautiful, they say that Doc liked her, and Big Kate got jealous. And supposedly there was a confrontation with Big Nose Kate and Lottie Deno with, you know, Kate came charging in at the table, and she pulled her gun on Lottie. Lottie pulled hers, and they were, and Doc stepped right in between them. But anyway, so she was there doing well with Frank, and I think, to make a long story short, the same kind of thing happened where there was a confrontation, and Frank had to So, you know, the guy got killed, and you know, now we're both on the run again. So they went to Silver City, and they just kind of drifted, and they ended up here. They ended up here in Deming, and they're like, that's it, we're done. We made piles of cash. They probably came in here with 100 grand, which now, you know, crazy money. They came in with their pile of cash, and this is where they retired, and they became upstanding citizens here. They did a lot of great things. People loved them. And I don't know if they kept their names here while they were alive, but in death, the Thurman name is on the grave, which we're walking to. It is just ahead. Interestingly, not only did they become upstanding citizens, but Lottie would have poker tournaments for charity, and I'll bet she lost on purpose. But yeah, they did a lot of good things here. They were, well, Frank, I guess, eventually became vice president of the Deming National Bank. Lottie helped found the St. Luke's Episcopal Church. Well, sadly, I shouldn't say sadly. I mean, she lived to a pretty good old age. She died on February 9th, 1934, and she's buried here. And she's buried right by the road here. Now, on the legacy side, what's interesting is if you ever seen Gunsmoke with James Arness, there was a woman who starred, well, she had the character role of Kitty, Miss Kitty. Supposedly, Miss Kitty on Gunsmoke is based on Carlotta, who in death or in life here, she went by Charlotte Thurmond. Thought that was very interesting. And here are their graves right here, the two of them, right on the road. Shout out to the guys here. This is on GPS, but cemetery crew here and the manager, they were really excited to help me confirm the location of the graves. And they were more excited to hear about the story. They didn't know about it. So I said, hey, watch my channel. So here is the grave of Frank. He died, I can't remember the year he died. I'll put it up in the caption. And Charlotte, Lottie Deno, here's her grave, guys. She died in 1934. What a legacy, huh? What a story. Well, we hope they're resting in peace, Frank and Charlotte. Carlotta, Lottie Deno, rest in peace.